We are recording the interview of Glen. This interview is being conducted by Pierre Casco from the collaborated efforts of the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project and the Raytheon Company. This interview is being recorded at Raytheon in Washington, D.C. It is 2:15 p.m. on November 4th, 2017. So, Glenn, thank you for being here. So we'll start off. Tell me where and when you were born.
I was born in Taegu, South Korea. My father was in the military. He was over there when he was very young, and I was born in South Korea. I lived there until I was about 3 years old, and my brother was also born there as well, and came to the United States.
Nice. So, who were your parents, and what were their occupations?
So my father, at the time, he was in the military. He was a 71 Lima in the United States Army.
Yes.
Worked in the PAC office for a while. My mother, her name was So-young Chu. She was a local from the area. We came back to the United States, and my Korean mother, who thought that my father was rich as an E5 in Korea, quickly learned that he wasn't a rich American, and ended up going back to Korea. So my father remarried Bernie there, my babysitter's turned mother, stepmother. I kind of really consider her my mother. She's the one who raised my brother.
So tell me about your brother. Did he serve in the military?
No, he didn't. My brother also learned probably from my mistakes, the things, the path I took. My brother and I are very different. You couldn't put us on two different ends of the spectrum, but you couldn't find two people who love each other more, probably. My brother is only a year younger than me, so being my father, he was in the military, so we moved around a lot, and he even got out of the military when we were young, but he still had this feeling, this desire to move, and we moved a lot. So everywhere we went, we traveled together. My brother and I, we were our best friends. So when we went to a new area, it wasn't always that hard, difficult part of making new friends and stuff like that, because no matter what, we always had each other. And I never called him my little brother. He was always just my brother. And they used to think we were twins for a little while there, but it's like, oh, you Asian look alike. But it was very typical some of the places we went. But my brother and I were my best friend growing up. We kind of split ways a little bit once I went to school. So he was only a year behind me. But we still are in touch quite a bit, and he's doing well good for himself right now.
That's great. So you said you moved a lot. What was your favorite location growing up?
I grew up most of my life in Michigan, Detroit area, and not just Detroit, the suburbs of Detroit too. We did live in Detroit. People always say that. Anybody from Michigan is like, where are you from? I'm from Detroit. Actually, we did live in Detroit for a little while. But my father, he was raised in Lincoln Park, which is like South Detroit. And we moved around a lot. He ended up joining, he worked for the post office. And he worked around a lot. He was a postal carrier for a while, but his injuries due to his time in the service, he was getting too old for that. It was a young man's game carrying mail. So he kind of went to the post office and worked behind his maintenance guy for a while. But I would say I spent some time in Texas. We moved to Texas for a little while. He quit the post office for a little bit and tried to get his hand in education. He wanted to go to junior college and earn a degree. He just realized at school he was just too old to go to school, he said. So we ended up coming back up to Michigan to work in a job in the post office again. But I think my favorite location was in where I had my formidable years of high school, which was in Michigan. So.
Nice. So what did you do before you entered the service?
Well, I did pretty well in school. Obviously, I wasn't the smartest kid in school. I wasn't the dumbest either. I kept my grades up. I ran track in school. Worked at a place called Meyer Thrifty Acres. I was a bagger for a while. My best job actually was working at Baskin Robbins. It was pretty cool. I got to eat a lot of free ice cream. Too much free ice cream, probably. But I actually went to a delayed entry program. I enlisted in the service when I was a senior in school, and wanted to be in the military. I wanted to fly helicopters. Actually, I wanted to be an astronaut. I figured I want to be an astronaut, I need to be a pilot first. So I want to go fly things. So I enlisted in the service thinking that you could enlist and be a helicopter pilot. Little did you know that the recruiter will tell you stuff like that, but it's not the truth. So I went in to sit down after my MEPS appointment to find out what kind of jobs I could do for my ASVAB test, and I said, well, I'm gonna fly helicopters, right? And they're like, well, these are the career paths we have for you. One is this, this, and this. And I didn't like any of them. And I was like, well, I don't like any of those. And they're like, well, you got to choose something. So I picked to be a 31 uniform, which is a strategic microwave communications repair person. And I was going to go. And I remember that day because I was 18 years old. I could do whatever I wanted, even though I was still living at home. I hadn't graduated. I was a senior. And my father, he pretty much didn't talk to me for about a week. I didn't understand why, because he was in the military. My uncles were in the military. My father's father was in the military. He was in the Navy. And, why is that? Well, my dad wanted more for me. He wanted better for me. And another reason that I enlisted as well, too, is I was going through the process of trying to apply to the United States Military Academy. And I thought by enlisting it would help get me a shoe-in, because the academy was a very long process. At the time, it was one of the most difficult schools to get into, as far as your physical test, your letter of recommendations from a congressman or a senator. It was a really long process. And I thought by enlisting would help do that, or at least let them know that I was serious about being in the military. So thankfully, my father, who was also a maintenance janitor, also cleaned the offices of the congressman. And he did not have any idea that I needed a congressional nomination. And my father didn't help in a sense of trying to get me that nomination, but he did drop a message to the secretaries, my son's trying to go to the academy. When he did that, I was able to get a nomination, and I went to the United States Military Academy. So.
Did your father's attitude change after you were accepted to the military academy?
I think, as with most enlisted folks, there is a stigma between enlisted and being an officer like that, and there's parts of me that wish I might have gone enlisted for a while to kind of learn things, but he was proud of me. Both my mom and dad were very proud. My mom, not being from the military, she was worried, obviously, but this was back, this was in the early 90s. There wasn't much going on. I wanted to be a pilot at the time. I really wanted to be a pilot. That was my aspiration, was to be an astronaut. And when I applied to the academy, I applied to all 3 academies, actually. And I wanted to go Air Force Academy because I figured I could fly. But then I had a really good principal. His name was Leo Schuster. And his son was going to the academy at the time. And he came in, he talked to me. He says, that the Air Force, the Army has more pilots than the Air Force does. I was like, how can that be true? And at the time, the Army had more airframes in the air than the Air Force did. So he said, if you want to be a pilot, it's a better chance to go that way. So I went to the academy to go be a helicopter pilot.
So you joined the Army, and you were a officer. What branch were you as an officer?
So I told you I wanted to be a pilot, so I wanted to go aviation. In order to do that, it's a very selective process to go aviation. And I did good in my grades, but not well enough. I failed some courses. Took what's called summer training academic program or staff. And it kind of hurt my chance a little bit to be in aviation. I was getting high enough ranks to do so, but then I was on the Army pistol team. And my Coach Majunk, noticed that my shots were getting off, and I didn't know why. And it turns out I had astigmatism in the right eye. I had 20/20 vision going into the academy, and it was perfect, but with astigmatism, it can kind of come and go wherever. So I was going to go get my flight physical, everything was done, and then when I discovered astigmatism in my right eye, I realized I couldn't go. Well, I had my entire life and career. You're talking to the kid who dressed up to be an Army man when I was 8 years old. I was an Army man every year. Being in the military was something that I felt like I had to do, and to be a pilot, to be an astronaut, it kind of all came crumbling down during my junior year in college. So I had a really quick scramble to find something else to do, and I had a really good NCO who I respected quite a bit. One good thing about being at the military academy is you're surrounded by people who are great. Just amazing individuals. McMaster's, who is, famously known right now, General McMaster, back then was Captain McMaster. These great heroes were around and just inspiring. And I was lucky enough to have an NCO who was talking about engineers, and he says, engineers are the way to go. He says, this is engineers like a smart infantryman, And I was like, that sounds good. And my grades were good enough. And I went engineers. And I had a really quick focus. Changing from 12 years old to 22 to hurry up and think of something else what I want to be, I had to really quick come on board and be an engineer. So that's what I went in.
So what was that engineer training like?
Engineering training was good. I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for my basic training, or my officer basic course. And while I was there, they give you a whole gamut. Engineering can be everything from a light engineer, which is basically an infantryman with a mine in his backpack, all the way up to topographical engineers who do nothing but do maps and terrain analysis and stuff like that. So a very large gamut. I had gone to OBC with the full intention of going to Ranger School, go take the RIP program they had there. And while I was at OBC, there was some personnel shifts like that, and they told me that I was going to a combat heavy battalion. At the time, I didn't understand what a combat heavy battalion did, but they're basically construction guys. So very different from what I thought I was going to be doing. But and it was a hard sell to me. I was trying to figure out that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the HUA airborne. I gone to airborne school. I wanted to be the airborne ranger. Be all tabbed out. Be HUA. But then, again, another great NCO that was there, Sergeant First Class Bowen, he told me that, combat heavy is very small units in the military. There's only 3 active duty combat heavy units and battalions in all of the Army. And he said that, and when you walk away from that, you have a lot of, real engineering under your belt. And I think he was struggling with his own thing because he was trying to get out of the military too, and he couldn't translate his skills from being a combat engineer into the real world. But all of his buddies who were constructions guys and who did these projects, they were being very successful. And so he kind of said, hey, at the time, hey, young LT, it's not that bad. Give it a shot, and if you don't like it, wait till later on, you can change it. And when I went to my first unit, I loved it. I found out that it was great to do something and to walk away from a project and actually see something, the fruits of my effort. So many times you go to training, you go in the field, you spend a week, being miserable, eating crappy food and doing something, but at the end of the day, all you're left was just cleaning up your equipment and doing the next time. That was field exercises. But in the combat heavy unit, you went out and you built a bridge, you built a building, you built a road, and you could go back and look at it and go like, wow, I did that. And my time in the combat heavy unit was very rewarding because I traveled all across the United States and did some really great projects that I could still take my kids back to now and say, look, Daddy built that. So Daddy and his men built that bridge or built that road. So it's great.
So where did you serve?
So primarily, besides Fort Leonard Wood, that's where I did my training at. I stayed at Fort Hood. My time in the military, I had a 5-year commitment. And I had a chance to leave and go do my officer advanced course and go take command someplace. At the time, I was not thinking I want to do anything outside of being a combat heavy engineer. And like a lot of people in the military, it's like, oh, I was just so sick of the bureaucracy of it all. It's like, it's got to be better in the corporate world. It's got to be out. But while I was there, I went to Laredo, Texas. I built 80 miles of road for the Border Patrol. I went to Pineville, Louisiana. I built U.S. Marshals. I built a shoot house for them. I went to New York for the DEA and FBI. I built a New York City Police Department. I built a shoot house, a training facility for them. So I got to travel all the way around the United States. And in 2001, June of 2001, I got out and said, I'm going to try my hand being a civilian. I went to work for Raytheon.
And how did that transition go for you from military to corporate world?
It was hard. It was hard because, in the Army, when you're there, you're owned by them all the time. So especially as an officer, I was an officer all the time. It wasn't like I could go cut it up at Fort Hood. We always go down to Austin and hang out in Austin and stuff like that. But then you're out there, trying to cut loose and hang out, and then you turn around and you look and your soldiers are there. And so there's that whole you kind of look at each other from across the room a little bit, and you kind of is he gonna come yell at me? Or there's no, are you doing something wrong? So it was that weird relationship. So when I got out of the military, it was tough because I went from being in charge of, I had everything from platoon. I was the adjutant for a while, so I had a pack to start off with. Then I was a platoon leader. Then I was an executive officer. Then I was a battalion construction officer. I served as a commander for a unit for a little bit of time. So in charge of every aspect of these people's lives. And I get out in the civilian world, and I'm an individual contributor. I'm just a guy, a project manager guy, and I didn't know anything about manufacturing engineering. That's the job I got. They say, hey, look, go work on this stuff. And I had to learn really quick what they did. It was just basic project management. But, it was a hard transition because when I became a team leader or I had people working for me, I would ask them questions like on the weekends, like, hey, where are you guys going this weekend? And they'd look at me like, why are you asking me where I'm going this weekend? And I'm like, if you're driving far, make sure you put this on there. Why are you lecturing me on this stuff? So it was very weird because I felt like I owned them, not owned them, but I cared about them as people, not just my workers. And that culture wasn't there in the civilian world. It was very much, hey, 5 o'clock, I'm done, I'm out of here. And I'm always like, hey, how far is drive home? Hey, it's raining outside, be careful. And I was always trying to look after them, take care of them. And I'd ask them questions like, about their families. They felt like very, like, why are you asking me about my family? And I was like, well, that's just where I come from. We take care of our own. So that was really difficult. But part of that too was that work ethic from the military that it wasn't just a 9-to-5 job, especially working for a company like Raytheon. I felt like I could pour myself into the job and get something out of it, which was really good. I appreciated that.
That's good. And what year was it that you got out?
So I got out in 2001, actually with terminal leave, and my official date was June 1st, 2001, but it was April with terminal leave and stuff like that. I got out. I wanted to do something, so during who else are you going to get like 3 months of leave? And you're never going to get that again. So I went and hiked part of the Appalachian Trail. I was going to be all like, yeah, this is great, and then come back to work. And it was good, but then 9/11 happened. Not long afterwards. And I had gone to work at Raytheon in Dallas, Texas with a friend of mine who was also a classmate from West Point. And we both were very much like, all right, we're going back to war. Very, very different. So I thought, well, my civilian career was cut pretty short. Time for me to go back to war. And we went down to recruiters and we talked to them and said, hey, what do we need to do? And the recruiter said, just go back and when we need you, we'll call you. And I had an engineer by the name of Ray Spinks. He came up and he asked me if I would take on a project. And very rewarding in the sense that the project required long hours, which I was used to already, and doing some pretty intuitive things, not intuitive things, things that were outside the box, things that they needed someone to be a little more creative, where I wasn't afraid to work until 10 o'clock at night. I didn't have a family, I didn't have kids. So it wasn't like so I could work until burn the midnight oil because I knew what the mission required me to do that. And it was good.
Very nice. So were you ever able to get back in?
So it's strange that you asked that. It was a little known fact, but when you join the military, anybody who joins the military, you have an 8-year commitment. Now, most times that's a active/inactive or reserve status. Some folks who joined the military, I had a 5-year commitment to the military, active duty, from West Point, and I had 3 years additional of inactive duty. Well, my inactive time ended in 2004. Little did I know, as an officer, you physically have to take your name off of the inactive reserve list. I was unaware of that. And in 2006, on Thanksgiving Day, I went to go walk outside my house. I was living in Texas, Allen, Texas, which is near Dallas. My folks still lived in Gatesville, Texas, which is near Fort Hood. It's about a 2-3 hour drive. And I was leaving my house to go to Thanksgiving with my in-law, with my parents, I mean. And I saw the FedEx package sitting underneath my mailbox, or my floor mat, or the placemat in front of the house. I picked it up and I threw it in the truck, didn't think anything of it. And when I got there, I was getting out of the house and I was like, let me rip open this package to look at it. And it said, you're being recalled to active duty. And I remember the guys in the transition, ACAP or TAPS, I think is what they call it now. And I said, no, will I ever have to serve reserve time? Or like that? I said, no, it'll take World War III before they called you back up. And I was like, so I'm reading this letter, I'm like, oh my gosh, World War III probably happened, and I need to go. So again, at the time, I was single. I didn't have anything to do. And I went back to my work, and I was like, look, they're calling me back in active duty. And I showed up at Fort Benning, and it was really odd because I showed up at Fort Benning wearing my woodland camouflage spit shine shoes, and they looked at me like I was some freaking relic. They looked at me like, so the first thing you're going to do is go to clothing and sales and get yourself a new uniform, and they had switched to the digital uniform at the time. And so it was interesting. I felt like the oldest captain in the United States Army. So they called me back, and I deployed to Iraq, and I deployed to Baghdad, Iraq, with called MINSTICI, and it was the Multinational Security Transition Command Iraq. It was the unit that General Petraeus commanded before he became the overall in charge of that area. Our job was to transition the security from Americans to the Iraqi military, the Iraqi police force, the Iraqi national police, and also the border patrol. And my specific job, because on my resume it said I had worked with the border patrol, they actually had a DHS, Department of Homeland Security liaison there, and his job was to go help these folks how to protect borders, because we protected our border, they should be able to do the same thing. So I spent most of my time in the green zone, they called it, or international zone, but I spent not most, but a lot of my time traveling from border to border, ports of entry, all the way across the United States. I've taken my claim to fame as traveling in every airframe that the Army and the Navy and the Marine Corps and the British have. I've flown in every helicopter known to man. I probably got more time in a helicopter than helicopter pilots, I feel like sometimes. But we traveled around quite a bit. But it was good.
Yeah. So overall, what was your experience on your deployment?
The deployment was tough. I had mentioned, for myself, it wasn't like I had a family back home. I had a girlfriend who later became my wife. But that was tough. She actually was in the military. She had deployed to Afghanistan in 2003, 2004, and out of the IRR. She had moved to Dallas, Texas, to be with me. And here I was leaving. So she was like, she moved all this way, left all of her friends and family, and so they had to move here. And I was leaving. So that was a little tough on our relationship, obviously. The green zone, and we were thinking, oh, they're going to have to train up for it. I started training in 2007 with a unit, the 104th IT battalion, battalion. Their job was to train first sergeants and drill sergeants, and it was all a bunch of reservists and a bunch of us, which IRR, we call ourselves the IRR posse because it was a bunch of captains who were all active duty. None of us had ever served a day in guard or reserves, joining a unit that never seen a day of active duty. So it was a very strange thing, and it's because as a training unit, they were all very top heavy, a lot of majors and lieutenant colonels, not a lot of captains, not a lot of lieutenants. So we were like the lowest ranking people as captains, in this unit. So they wanted us to go get something from a supply officer like that. Well, we didn't have NCOs, it was us. It was all command sergeant majors and stuff like that, master sergeants. So when we went there, we didn't have a lot of faith in the unit we're going with, because when I say we, all the other active duty captains that were activated, we were scared of our own unit, because they didn't know they hadn't fired their weapons in years, or were very good shots at that point. And again, our job wasn't going like door kickers, and we knew that wasn't our job. But when we got there, it was during the surge, and at the time we were getting shelled every day. It was really bad. In fact, we lost 2 of our folks there. We lost countless contractors. I felt really bad for the contractors, because here's the people who got out of the military and came back in as a contractor to help out. They came for the money, and now they were being sent home in a box because of the fact that they wanted the money. I wouldn't say it was greedy, but it was just sad. It was hard to see that. We got a lot. It was a lot, and it was that in the beginning, and I saw it in myself when the unit came in to replace us. We had a Air Force unit that came in to kind of intermittent in between our tour. They kind of came in 3 months after, left 3 months before us. And I was like, man, you go Air Force, my tour is awesome. But in the beginning, we were all kind of scared. And the hard thing about it is that all your training, all the things that we were taught to do, to close and engage with the enemy, and call in fire, to do, all these things. When the rockets were coming in, it was just random. It was just random. We used to joke that a lot of rounds came in, they would hit the porta potties, or they would hit the latrine trailers. And we used to laugh and say, the bad guys, they hate bathrooms. That's why they're trying to tear our bathroom. And the other kind of morbid joke of it too is like, we told our friends, if I ever die in a toilet, make sure you pull my pants back up, because I don't want to die that way. I don't want to go home thinking that I died on a toilet someplace. But we got hit quite a bit, and then so I thought it was safe for me. I was like, oh, good, I'll go out to the borders. Let's get away from all this. But then you came into you got IEDs that you had to contend with. You had helicopters that would go down. These helicopters were being used a lot more than they were intended to be used. So that added an additional risk. I was working with the multinational unit, so I dealt with the Brits down in Basra. I traveled out to Al-Qaim to build a port of entry out there. Qasr was down south by Kuwait. Erbil, which is up north in the Kurdish area. I got to travel all over the country, which was great. But each place had its own unique challenges. In the northern Kurdish area, you got off the aircraft and people didn't even know where their body armor or their weapons were. It was very safe up there. It was almost a false sense of security, and I couldn't get rid of my weapon. I felt like I had to have it on me. Contrast that to Rabia, which we were right on the border of Syria, and they were getting attacks. The day that I left, a person came through a suicide bomb, and we were taking biometric data from the people who were coming across the border, and he embedded himself with the guys that I had just got done supporting. So it went from being safe to not safe, not safe, and I found myself being hyper vigilant all the time. Something that I still shake to this day of how not to be. I don't know how to turn it off. That's something that I've had.
So when did you return from your deployment, and where did you go?
So because I was a augmentee to this unit, I didn't come back as a unit. They just threw me on a plane with a bunch of other folks that were having to go back with me at the same time. But we landed at Fort Riley, Kansas, and it was very much normally you have like the big ceremony, all the family members are standing out there cheering for you and stuff like that, but there was nothing like that. It was very much we walked into the stadium, we're at attention, some colonel or general made a speech who I didn't know who he was, had mentioned something about us. There was a couple family members there from some of the like another unit we had come home with. They actually was a real unit, so the family members were there, but the rest of us we just kind of came home. So we came home in April of 2009. 2008, and like I said, I was working for Raytheon. I got called back up, and I just went home and started working back at Raytheon. And it was different because here I was surrounded by a bunch of really close friends that I had deployed with, and it wasn't like the unit could all come back together and slowly integrate back. I came back. I didn't have a house. I didn't have anything. So I came back. I had to find a place to live. My job, thank goodness, they were very understanding that I need some time to kind of transition back into the real world, and bought a house and came back. My job, obviously, you couldn't hold it from my job for years, so I came back to like a special projects, which was very unrewarding. I was in charge of a team of people before. Now that team had all been dispersed, and I was just kind of brought back very much alone, and it was very difficult to try and reintegrate myself into the day-to-day job. And the big joke I laugh all the time is that people would come to work and they'd be stressed about something. And I'd ask them a question, it's like, is anybody shooting at you today? Did anybody try to shoot you or kill you on the way to work? You know what? It's not that bad. It's not that stressful. Let's put things in perspective. You're safe. It's okay. It's just a project. We're going to work through it. It's going to be all right. But yeah, that transition back to the real world was, you see the things, not to be generalizing, but people come back with PTSD issues, and I probably have. I know it's probably one of those things I haven't really addressed fully, but the transition, I think I'm still transitioning. Here I am. I'm celebrating 10 years from being deployed. This coming up April will be almost 10 years. Will be 10 years, and I'm still haven't fully transitioned back. I try to mask all that with a lot of the involvement I do with the veterans groups that I get involved with. SVA, I try to help a lot with that. I'm also a leader in our employee resource group for Ray Vets, which is for Raytheon. And I try to help people coming back too, and with the understanding that everyone doesn't come back with the same experience. My experience is different from the next guy, and there's not a one-stop answer for all that stuff to fix it, to help that. So I try.
Have you fully separated from the Army, or will you get a call here in a few years?
So the big joke was that while I was in Iraq, my mother received all my mail was forwarded to my mother because I sold my house. I didn't want to have an empty house. So I sold all my mother. My mother was really frantic. She's worried. She got this letter from the Department of Defense, and she didn't know what it was. I said, well, open it up, Mom. And she goes, it says you're being separated. And I'm like, that's funny. I'm over here in Iraq, and it says I'm being separated. And the reason I was being separated is because of the fact, not for any reason, but it was a PERSCOM mistake, is that I had been passed over to be a major. I was a captain in the Army, but it had extended the period of time that I hadn't actually gone to the Officer Advanced Course, or ILE, which are the school requirements to be a major. And I kind of laugh about this, but while I was in Iraq as a captain, and I just came back in the military as a captain, I was filling a major role slot, but I was still a captain. And I was there, and I ran into one of the people that was one of my platoon leaders. I was a company commander, one of my platoon leaders. And that person was a major. So I was like, I'm damned if I'm going to salute you, but it's so weird. But that's why I was being separated. So PERSCOM got involved. I'm like, well, we can't separate the guys in Iraq. I kind of laughed at all my buddies. I'm going home. The Army says they're separating me. And that's just a mistake. But in 2009, I got another letter that finally said, okay, this time for real, you're out of the military. And there was a part of me that was hard because I had, since 12 years old, I had associated myself with the military all the time. I said, oh, that's all I want to do with my life. And now I was just a civilian. And it was weird to consider myself a veteran. I always prompted my folks, even folks who are in the military, on Veterans Day, we celebrate them. We thank them for their service. But now I was just a civilian. I wasn't. My military ID card had an expiration date on it. When I first got out, my card said indefinite on it, which was great. Indefinitely, I was going to be an officer of the United States Army. But then when I got second time, I actually had a date on it. And then when the date came and went, I was no longer in the military.
So what have you done since separating?
Well, obviously working for Raytheon. I moved around quite a bit within Raytheon, mainly in the North Texas area. I got married. Got 2 kids now. It's changed my life quite a bit. I still get involved with, I said that the military organizations. I think with RAVETS, I work with USO. USO is now trying to be a transition command to help people transition out of the military into the civilian world. And I still have this need to serve, and I think that's another reason why I work at Raytheon, because we make products to serve folks downrange. It's funny because my father, he's always been associated with the military, even though he got out very young. He got out as an E5. He knew he couldn't support 2 kids on his own. So he got out to go work in the post office. Not what he wanted to do, but that's what he did. And he ended up getting involved with the American Legion, and he is the co-founder of the American Legion Riders. So the American Legion Riders is a motorcycle group because they wanted to infuse the American Legion and VFW with people who were coming back, because there was a big divide between the Vietnam veteran folks and we had a couple Gulf War I folks in there for the most part, but all the other people who were coming back, they couldn't transition. They didn't have a place to go to because they couldn't connect. So my father invented or created this American Legion Rider group that's maybe with motorcycles. People come back and they have like this community. And so he's always given back, and he's kind of set the example. So I felt like I always need to be part of something that was always giving back to veterans. And Vietnam veterans didn't get a really good welcoming home, and anything I could do to help out with them is what I try to do.
So what are some life lessons that you learned from your military service, all of it, your whole time?
So much. I think the military does a good job of taking people from all different walks of life. It doesn't matter what color, race, or religion you are, and putting them into together to say, you know what, you need to complete a task. And it doesn't matter how much you can lift, it doesn't matter the color of your skin, it doesn't matter what God you believe in. You're all going to work together to accomplish that task. And that teamwork is something that's, I think the military, while not perfect, they are not perfect by any means. They kind of blaze the way of things like diversity. It's like the buzzword now in the corporate world, diversity and inclusion. And we were doing EO classes back, many years ago, back when I was in basic training. I've had one every year since then, it seems like. So to them, it's like a new buzzword. I try to explain that the military's been doing this for a long time, And I think that can-do attitude with people who have a common, work together to achieve a common goal, and teamwork is something that the military thrives in. What other organization do we give young folks? We're talking pride. Even an E2 has responsibility, not just for his or her own stuff, but it could be of their buddy, and as they grow in rank, I was a lieutenant, I was 22 years old, and I had control of 30 people and millions of dollars of equipment that what other 22-year-old would have responsibility for that. And you train these folks to work in a team, to take responsibility, attention to detail, and I'm not here to tell you that everyone who goes in the military comes out as a shining star. I'm not telling you that. But I think a majority of the folks who come out have the ability. The military spends so much money. They spent over $300,000 on me alone to go to West Point military. For a pilot, they pay millions of dollars to send a pilot, to make a pilot. A Navy SEAL costs lots of money. What are we doing with these folks when they get out? We spend a lot of time and money invested in them. We just need to kind of continue the mission. We need to get them out and use them for the right purposes and harness that. So I think the military does great for getting the foundations there, giving them the experience that the can-do attitude, the confidence that they can do something. We just, as a society, need to harness in on that and have them continue to do that in another way. They don't have to have a helmet and a gun to go do it again. They can use that passion and that drive to go do whatever they want to do to better all of us. And I think we don't do a real good job of that. But the military, in my opinion, in my experience, has done a good job of getting that foundation started for those large group of people.
So I just have a few more questions for you. Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
I think the unsung heroes of the military is the family members. When I first joined the Army, my very first unit, when I got there, it was a ghost town. I walk into the S1 office, there's nobody there. I mean, I'm looking for someone to report to, and I don't know who that person is. The unit deployed to Bosnia, and I became the adjutant, the rear detachment commander / adjutant. And part of my job was to work with at the time, they're called family support groups or family readiness groups. So my job was to help with all the wives and families in the rear, to help them with the problems they had and be the coordinator and stuff. And I saw then firsthand that the families really do play a big role in the military, because the fact that they are the unsung heroes. Because when they talk about how many deployments their husband or wife went on, that family went on that deployment too. They might not have physically been there, but they suffered the absence of having someone gone for a while. And you saw that the folks with a strong family unit in the back, the guys in forward, they could focus on their mission. But when there was distractions, when there were things in the bad, running up phone or bills, they couldn't pay them, or getting evicted. Now the folks who were deployed weren't focused on that, because how can they focus on their mission when things in the rear weren't happening the way they're supposed to? So I saw firsthand then the importance of the family. When my girlfriend at the time deployed to Afghanistan, and I supported her, I sent her packages, I did all kinds of stuff, and it was tough because we had this discussion every time we talked to other veterans, that they asked the question, what was harder, being the person back home or being the person deployed? And we both vehemently say it's being the person back home, because you didn't know what was going on. It was very much the unknown. And heaven forbid you watch the news, because the news was always like, anytime something bad was happening, she couldn't get a hold of me. It wasn't instantaneous information. So it was always hard to be the one in the rear, and you had to kind of go on in your daily life and worry about something that you couldn't do nothing about. So the unsung heroes, I think, in the military, that we couldn't have as strong military as we do if it wasn't for the family support that lets our military do their job.
So what message would you like to leave for future generations who will view this interview?
To be brave. Be brave. It doesn't matter what you do. As far as being in the military, if you want to join the military, I'm not encouraging everyone to join the military. I mean, there's some people who just weren't meant for the military, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But whatever you do, just be brave. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be scared. I can count numerous times I was scared, but I was able to say, hey, I'm scared. It's okay to be scared. I still got to get things done. And don't let that fear stand in the way of what you need to do. You can still do it. You don't have to go through boot camp to do it.
Great. Well, Glenn, this concludes the interview. Thank you for your service.
Take care.